Alright, today we're going to talk about the rock cycle. So, when we talk about the rock cycle, we're going to have to go through each type of rock. So we're going to start with magma. What happens to magma to turn it into an igneous rock? Well, it's going to go through a process known as crystallization. So the crystallization of magma can occur either fast, like an extrusive rock, or slow, making it an intrusive rock. So our extrusive rock, we look for fine-grained texture, as you would see here in this sample of basalt. The basalt doesn't have large crystals that are visible to the eye, so we would call that extrusive, and it formed on the surface very quickly. If it formed extremely quickly, we might call it obsidian, which is a glassy textured igneous rock, but also extrusive. Our intrusive igneous rocks have larger crystals. They're visible. In rocks like granite, shown here, you would see large crystals of black, white, and pink, signifying that it cooled below the surface at a much slower rate. Now, if we look at these igneous rocks, we see that there's a variety of colors. Color indicates what it's made of, or composition. So our light-colored igneous rocks, like granite, we call felsic. Felsic have light color. They contain the white crystals, quartz, and the pink feldspar, and they're high in silica. The darker rocks, such as our basalt that we saw that was extrusive, would be our mafic rocks, containing things like pyroxene. They're high in iron and magnesium, and that gives them that darker color that you would call mafic. But all of these would be igneous rocks formed from volcanism, such as the eruption of a volcano, or even underground magma chambers that would harden and turn into rock. Now, when we're looking at igneous rocks, we need a little bit of both. We need to know their texture, and we need to know what they're made of. So we use a chart called the Igneous Identification Chart. On that chart, you have rows. There's a row for texture on the side, and it tells you whether it's fine, glassy, coarse, or very coarse. And then you have your composition. If you look towards the bottom here, on yours that you guys have done in class, you should be able to see that it says felsic, intermediate, mafic, and then ultramafic. Our felsic ones, again, they're high in that quartz and feldspar that we talked about in class. And then our intermediate have a little bit of plagioclase feldspar, but are mostly these darker colors, or about half and half, rather. And then you have your darker pyroxene that you would find in your mafic rocks. So that, again, we have felsic, intermediate, and mafic. Then ultramafic being like our kimberlites, where we'd find our diamonds. When you're using the chart, you're going to plug in texture. That gives you which row you would find your rock. And then you're going to also consider what it's made of, its composition down here. And that's a percentage of either quartz and feldspar. And you have your biotite and your amphiboles down here. And you're going to consider how much of the rock would fall in each percentage. So, we'll talk more about this later, but for now, just keep in mind you have felsic, intermediate, mafic, ultramafic, and then your textures, which are either going to be extrusive or intrusive textures that are going to be more specific on the right-hand side. Now, what happens to an igneous rock that's going to change it into sediments? If you said weathering and erosion, you are correct. So we're taking our igneous rock, we're going to weather and erode it down into sediments. Then those sediments are going to become sedimentary rock. Well, what processes could take sediments and make them into sedimentary rock? If you said compaction and cementation, you are correct. That's how we get our clastic sedimentary rocks. So clastic form from compaction and cementation of sediments into a rock. That whole process is known as lithification. So if you have both of these, you can call it lithification. And that's how you would get your sandstones, your conglomerates. The example here would be shale. It looks a lot like the basalt we looked at when we looked at